Hello and welcome to the Wethersfield Historical Society's summer video series. My name is Gillie Johnson and I am the museum educator here at the Wethersfield Historical Society. Today we have a very special presentation from Mr. Charles Floyd, who will be bringing to light the historical figure of Quash Gomer. Quash Gomer was an enslaved man in Wethersfield who purchased his freedom. But before we turn to Mr. Floyd's presentation, let's learn a little about Quash Gomer's life. A simple, elegant headstone in the ancient burying ground introduces us to Quash Gomer. Native of Angola, brought from there in 1748, died June 6, 1799, aged 68 years. How exactly Quash Gomer got to Wethersfield is not known. After surviving the horrors of the Middle Passage, he was likely taken to the West Indies because that's where millions of captive Africans were sent. From there, like Venture Smith and other enslaved individuals, he might have been transshipped to New England directly after arriving by slave ship in the West Indies. What's more likely, though, is that he was purchased by a Connecticut, if not a Wethersfield, sea captain, engaged in the maritime trade that went on between Wethersfield and the West Indies. We know that such transactions took place because of evidence from the Wethersfield Historical Society's collection. In our collection, we hold a balance sheet for the sloop Polly, which was owned by Wethersfield merchant Justice Riley. This balance sheet is signed by Justice Riley's son, Justice Riley Jr., and it was signed at Cape Francois in what is now the modern-day nation of Haiti. This balance sheet lists 2 enslaved Africans, their value, and the amount due to the ship, and doubtless other such horrible, monstrous, wicked transactions took place between Wethersfield merchants and West Indies slave traders. In 1766, Quash Gomer earned his freedom by paying his owner, farmer John Smith, 25 pounds for his freedom. Quash Gomer, when he was enslaved, would have worked for other men, and his earnings would have been deducted from his owner's debts. Quash Gomer doubtless saved some of the money that he earned in order to purchase his freedom. He probably also earned money in another way too, possibly by playing music at weddings or other events. After all, we know that after Quash Gomer became free, he purchased fiddle strings from Wethersfield merchant Joseph Webb. So perhaps Quash Gomer used his musical abilities to help earn money for his freedom. In that same month that Quash Gomer became free, he married Eleanor Smith in New York City. We know this because of the liturgy of the Church of England, which was written by the Reverend Samuel Auchmuty, who was rector of Trinity Church and missionary to the blacks in the city. Why New York City and not Wethersfield? Why the Church of England and not the Congregational Church? There's no way to know for certain. And there are other mysteries too when it comes to Quash Gomer's life. For example, why the surname Gomer? Gomer is not a Connecticut surname. The name Gomer appears among German communities in Pennsylvania and the Midwest. The other place the name Gomer appears is in the Old Testament of the Bible. In Hebrew, Gomer means wholeness or completion. Did Quash Gomer know this and choose the name Gomer because he felt complete once again once he obtained his freedom? There's no way to know for certain. What we do know for certain is that Quash Gomer was literate because he signed the account books of Thomas Hurlbut, and we have those account books in the Wethersfield Historical Society's collections. Thomas Hurlbut was a shoemaker who made shoes for the Gomer family once Quash Gomer was free. The other thing we know for sure about Quash Gomer is that he negotiated an apprenticeship indenture for his son Francis with Benjamin Butler Jr. of Wethersfield. So in a moment we will turn to Mr. Floyd's presentation. Mr. Floyd is a retired state revenue examiner who now works as a building sump in the Plainville schools. At one time an aspiring actor, Mr. Floyd takes great joy in performing and bringing a character to life. We are so lucky to have him here today for this video. So without further ado, let us enjoy as Mr. Floyd brings Quash Gomer to life.
Quash Gomer is a free Negro man that has good right, power, and authority to act and transact for himself, to sue and be sued, clearly as though he never was a slave or servant. Have you ever heard sweeter words as though he never was a slave or servant? Beautiful, just beautiful. You see, I started my life free in Angola among my family, but I was snatched by the traitors and shackled inside the cramped tomb of a slave ship bound for the New World. I was 17 when I was brought to the colonies, not yet an adult, but old enough to be sold to a master. I ended up here, in Wethersfield, slave to John and Mabel Smith and John Goodrich. I served with a free Negro orphan, Mary Willoughby. It was a struggle for Mary, yes. She was free, but she was dirt poor, so she was no better off than me. Yet, even so, those beautiful words of freedom came on November 8th, 1766, when I bought my freedom for £25. With the support of Mr. John Goodrich, who provided a small house for me to live in to help me get started on my feet, I earned my freedom by taking on extra work from neighbors and entertaining townspeople with my fiddle. I had barely enough to scrap by as a freedman, but in that November 1766, I married Miss Eleanor Smith, finally taking a wife when I was 35. We had 10 children together, greatly growing our family. Death was never far from my door, but I persevered. In always kept the shoes on my family's feet for a time. My family and I lived on Windmill Hill in a small one-chimney house on land belonging to Levi Broadman. Other freed slaves lived nearby on Broadman's properties. Well, I had 2.5 acres to farm. And we got by until Broadman died and his debts had to be paid up. As a result, I lost my home to predator Joseph Webb. As I lost my home, I also lost my job and had to hire out my able children as servants. My daughter, Catherine, we call her Cat, was hired out to Timothy Griswold as a servant. 6-year-old Frances to Frederick Butler to learn husbandry, to care for crops and animals, and 13-year-old Gomer, apprenticed to Hezekiah Butler, also to learn husbandry. I lived a hard and heavy life with the reality of enslavement and the savior of freedom. I purchased the freedom for myself and my wife and was able to raise 2 free babies. No small feat. I struggled for job, land, home, and education, but my children and I can all read and write. I clothed my children, apprenticed them out to learn skills, and rose above my struggles.
Today we learned about Quash Gomer. With Quash Gomer, there are many written records that help us to document his life. But to discover these written records requires diligent research. The same cannot be said about many people from the past. Many people from the past leave behind fewer written records. This is especially true of African Americans, who are too often left out of official records. There's so much more we'd like to know about Quash Gomer's life, but there's only so much that written records can tell us. To fill in the bare bones of a life requires dedicated research and constructing a historical record from which to work within. So thank you for joining us today to view Mr. Floyd's presentation and to learn about Quash Gomer. Be sure to check out the Wethersfield Historical Society's website, where we will be posting more videos on other topics from Wethersfield's history. Until then, thanks for watching.